Welcome to an episode of The New Dad Rock. And guess what, boys and girls, listeners? We have a very special guest tonight.
We do?
We do. It's Brian Reiss.
Wait, the Brian Reiss?
Yes, the Brian Reiss.
Two college radio DJs during the 90s. Hosts Keith and Steve helped expose bands like Nirvana, Pavement, and PJ Harvey. They were in the shows, interviewed musicians, and reviewed albums for various zines and papers. They worked security at concerts, and once even did loading for Fish. Now they're dads. Whether you want to explore lesser-known music or take a trip down memory lane, tune to the New Dad Rock. Join hosts Keith and Steve as they navigate the ages together, sharing their love of music across various eras and genres. Always well-intentioned, often well-informed, seldom boring. The New Dad Rock will expand your mind.
Who's Brian Reiss?
Well, Brian Reiss, we talked about a couple episodes ago because he, or an AI-generated prompt by Brian, wrote us a very nasty letter because we were kind of dragging the co-hosts that we've had on episodes. And I will say that Brian was our very first guest all the way back in episode 14,
Yep.
Van Halen versus Van Hagar. He was our first guest and actually did give us a legitimate pump back in our early nascent stages.
Is that via Facebook? We got all the Facebook likes and listens?
I think so. I think it's the moral of the story is friends should tell their friends about this awesome podcast that they're listening to, The New Dad Rock.
Which is now on YouTube.
Exactly. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Brian. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Glad to be back. So I survived the 70s episodes when you guys were questioning how the guests you had and using AI to question the guests you had. So yeah, we had a fun AI back and forth of writing complaint letters and complaint responses, and AI did me right and got me back on the show by my AI complaint.
Yeah, well, Brian, welcome back again. We've had other guests on multiple times, so I won't even say you, but you were our first guest. And the reason we brought you back from 1985 is I think all of our listeners must recall that episode because you remember all the episodes verbatim. But you had an excellent Rush jean jacket. And in 1985, Rush was pretty much, at the peak of their powers.
I did. So my jean jacket was from a few years later. It's the show of hands, rock, paper, scissors. So it hadn't come quite yet to 85, but Keith and I were just discussing the 2002 roller skating rink on Long Island. And Keith, when the roller skating rink closed, it became a flea market where I actually got the Rush airbrushed rock, paper, scissors because they did all things airbrushing booth.
Whoa, so they closed pretty early.
That's where I got it.
And they didn't care about copyrights.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, roller skating was definitely a fad.
I mean, I went to...
there's not a lot of escape rooms left, are there?
No. I mean, they must have become something. Are they like pickleball courts now?
Probably.
Dude,
Yeah.
I mean...
Ours went to a flea market, and then it became a Target, so...
Well, I mean, Target's basically like an organized flea market anyway.
Right. So Brian, I understand you're an avid listener. I hope you're an avid listener. And one of the main topics that we've been talking about over the last few episodes is these completely inappropriate pop songs that were like totally overtly sexual. And, me as an 8, 9, 10-year-old, I'm walking down the street singing a song about a guy going to a peep show.
I was listening to your episodes. Did love She's a Beauty as well. Keith, I feel like Keith needs to go watch the video because the video for She's a Beauty was also a great one as well. And maybe that was it. Maybe that some of the people realized, well, I have to write more sexually explicit stuff, so I have a video to go with it in the MTV generation.
Right. And I think the problem was a lot of that sexually explicit stuff. I think a couple of the moms finally did get together and were like, wait a minute, what is the lyrics to this song? And they formed the PMRC.
You know what that means without looking? You don't.
Parental Music Resource Center.
That's it. Parents.
Oh,
music.
the M is not mom. I think I thought the M had a mom, something to do with moms, but I guess not.
It's all about the music, man.
It was because of Tipper Gore. I think that's why we think it was moms.
Right?
Yeah.
So there was the, in 85, the Filthy 15, where they named 15 songs that were just so sexually explicit, including my favorite, She Bop, and got together and had congressional hearings about what they were going to do about this problem.
Yeah. And as we covered all the way back in episode 5, the PMRC, I will say took a very arbitrary list of songs and basically banned them. I mean, some of these I don't even know. Like, I listen to Black Sabbath and I don't even know the song Trashed. Like, what are they talking about? Merciful Fate? Okay, Into the Coven. Merciful Fate, bunch of Satanists, but who actually listened to Merciful Fate? And Def Leppard, High and Dry, Saturday Night. Like, okay, we're going out to a party on Saturday night. Like,
yeah, I'm more confused by the "we're not going to take it, Twisted Sister." I assume they were offended by the Twisted Sister aspect of that. But Twisted Sister was formed in 1972, so they should have gotten up in arms much earlier.
yeah. So,
Well, and I was just sad for my good buddy Steve here, because he has built up throughout the 80s just how the Iron Maiden was really leading the pack with their Satanism, and they didn't make the list. And I just, what do you think, Steve? How were you disappointed they didn't make the list? How did that work?
I mean, I didn't care. Like, the stickers came on the albums, but I still bought them. And, you know, Iron Maiden in 1985 were on Live After Death. And I think that was the demarcation or the end of the line. And I think from that point on, 85 was the line in the sand. And then they went into a more progressive vein with, you know, Somewhere in Time, Seventh Son, and all the albums since then, in the ensuing 30 plus years, have all been in the progressive vein. And in 1985, that left the door open for some really extreme variations on metal to come through. So I know hair metal was very big in 1985, and we can stick a pin in that and get back to it. But in 1985, the first album that is described as death metal is Possessed, Seven Churches, and the last song in the album is called Black Metal, and it's the growling vocals, because also in 1985 you have Overkill, Feel the Fire, which is very high-pitched screaming. The natural progression of Iron Maiden continued down the speed and the gallop and really intensified that. So Overkill took the flame. Metallica had already taken the flame, and that's where thrash kind of took over in the progression in metal. Slayer Hell Waits also comes out in 1985. Anthrax Spreading the Disease in 1985. These are all, like, Iron Maiden stopped progressing into the speed and the death and the Satanism. So, very long tangent to say I was not disappointed that the PMRC did not include Iron Maiden.
And you mentioned the labels that they put on, and I feel like it certainly bands would get a bump in sales if you got that label on, and you could go to the record store and see, oh, you know, how am I gonna get this one, or how am I gonna get my parents to get this one? But they did say early on that you could get a boost in your sales just by getting that label slapped on. So I guess it kind of backfired.
Yeah. So labels are one thing that I think 1985 is kind of remembered for. Keith, what episode was it? I want to say 81 or 82, where you're like, there's just too much music out there. We were overwhelmed by all the songs that were popular. And I mean, look at the things that were popular in 85.
Oh my God. So, there was 17 different bands had their first number one, like Billboard number one hit in 85. Simple Minds, Tears for Fears, Bryan Adams, Whitney Houston, Starship, Mr. Like, so
Yeah.
It was like, just seemed like week after week, it was a brand new band having making it to the top of the charts.
And they're all over the place. Some of them are kind of hard rock or Foreigner. Like, people who liked hard rock and heavy music liked Foreigner. Although by 85, they'd kind of softened their image a little bit. But I think the mantle had been fully passed from guitar-based rock by 85, and the synth pop and the new wave sounds had taken over. This is where metal began to really progress in more extreme places, and they were never going to be pop anymore. Like, you look at Dio's album, Sacred Heart from 1985. You look at some of those songs, Hungry for Heaven and Rock and Roll Children. They're essentially pop songs. Guitar-based pop songs. Nobody wanted to hear that anymore. So metal and extreme.
Yeah, another interesting thing that was happening then was you had all these solo acts from people who came from earlier bands, like Sting went solo, and Phil Collins has his first solo album. So that's kind of interesting. I wonder if that was because the artist wanted to be free, or if that was the corporate music train pushing people to focus on an individual over a group. Because groups were much bigger, I feel, in the 70s, whereas it seemed the solo artist was becoming the focal point in the 80s.
Or was it just it was the 80s me generation, and so all the I want to stop being part of the group, and maybe my group success was really me, and so I want to do my solo album. I don't know.
Yeah, they also had enough money to build their own home studios probably, and they're all living in the south of France or Greek island or the Caribbean, and they're just making music at their house.
Yeah, well, one artist, when you look back at 1985, you have hair metal is ascendant. You have the synth-based pop. You have these solo artists, and one solo artist that stands apart from all this time
is Madonna.
Is Tom Waits. Tom Waits. How does the album Rain Dogs come out at the same time when we're looking at Rock Me Amadeus? We're looking at
Whitney Houston and Wham, right? Wham had a couple of number one.
Yeah, Careless Whisper is number one that year. You have Like a Virgin by Madonna. Yeah. Wham has the third most popular song, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. You had Money for Nothing by Dire Straits. Take On Me by Ha-Ha. Yeah, dude.
Shout. Let it all out.
And then like you said, Steve, and then you have Rain Dogs, which is but I will say that trying to get ready and thinking about the new dad rock, I kept coming back to, there's so much pop. It was like nonstop pop. So what was going on in 85 that really the new dad rock would get around? And you hit it, Steve. It's Rain Dogs. Like, everybody else is hitting pop. And we'll talk about college rock in a second too. I really didn't follow it back then the way you guys have introduced me to some of the bands in college rock that were coming out and getting a start at this point. But the Rain Dogs, my experience learning about Tom Waits this period was through David Letterman. Like, I was a huge early Letterman fan. I saw him at the old late night show when I got into high school, and our Letterman started in 82, and Tom Waits was on with Swordfish Trombones. And for those who don't know, Letterman, actually, one of his favorite guests of all time was Tom Waits, and he asked Tom Waits to do his final episode. So definitely, that was one that I think really connects to the new dad rock versus so much of this pop 85 stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we speak of the solo artists at the time, Just a Gigolo by David Lee Roth, All She Wants to Do Is Dance, Don Henley, and at the same time you have Tom Waits singing Time, or you have We Sail Tonight for Singapore. Like, we're all as mad as hatters here. Like, it's just completely diametrically opposed to anything that's going on in a popular current. And we look back here, almost 40 years later, and we say Tom Waits is the one that we're still listening to. You have The Cure, Head on the Door came out in 85. You still listen to that. Live After Death, I still listen to that. But Tom Waits is the one who was completely apart from time, has the song called Time and has now stood the test of time.
I do want to say that, what is it? Low Life by New Order came out. And that was a couple of my favorite songs by them, including Love Vigilantes and The Perfect Kiss.
Again, how do you connect from the 80s to the new dad rock with so much pop going on? And I've heard you talk about, what they're kind of, I guess maybe in 85 or I don't know what year somebody coined college rock, but a lot of the bands I've heard you talking about, the Smiths and Paul Westerberg and New Order, they are all sort of doing more and more coming out in 85. And one interesting point that I read about that someone said was that, they're like, on the one hand, okay, they came out with these sort of best of, like these early best of, right, albums. And you're not supposed to like a best of before when a band is in the middle. But they also made the point that I forgot about, like, it was hard to get, albums that were out of Europe at the time, right?
Yep.
And so that was like a way that you first learned about a lot of these bands and got to hear stuff, and then could later go back and find it. But yeah, I was going to ask you about that because a lot of those bands, Jesus and Mary Chain, I do love.
Catching up with Depeche Mode was huge.
Yeah, exactly. Psycho Candy, I just bought on Record Store Day the Lost in Translation soundtrack, and the Jesus and Mary Train, song on that has always been one of my favorites that I think really sets the mood for them.
Well, speaking of best of albums, the live best of album, 1985, had two of the biggest: Worldwide Live by Scorpions and Live After Death by Iron Maiden. Like, those are perfect examples of albums that they went back and looked at their last 5 records and said, oh, what are the 4 best songs from each of them? They put them on their live version, and those, they're classics for a reason.
By the way, 1985 is crazy because back in 1985, Marty McFly got in a DeLorean and went back to 1955, and here we are in 2024 going back to 1985.
Yeah, and that's a further distance. Are we like Pat? What year was Back to the Future 3 where he went into the future? Wasn't that a few years ago?
Oh my!
Like, we're definitely not as futuristic as they thought we were going to be.
Yeah, where's my flying skateboard?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think I actually saw number 3 all the way through, but I know there's a flying skateboard in 2 or 3. That's too.
I didn't. I only saw the first one.
The first one was amazing, but 2 and 3, tough. Poor Michael J. Fox.
So I think in 85, obviously movies played a big part of it. So St. Elmo's Fire, Desperately Seeking Susan with Madonna, Back to the Future, like you said. Rocky had, Rocky 4 was out that year. A View to a Kill was the Bond song. And most importantly, I think Breakfast Club. I mean, so many great songs were in that soundtrack, but Breakfast Club, I think, established the official cliques of high school. And I think in 1985, like you said so many episodes ago, Keith, is there's too much music. We need to classify it. We need to break it down into heavy metal and hair metal and black metal and thrash metal. We have to say it's pop rock, or it's college rock, or it's synth pop, or it's she-bop, or it's hip-hop. You don't stop.
You okay over there? Brian, can you check on him?
I have to add one movie, though. Again, Keith, I could not believe European Vacation, that had the key song from European Vacation was performed by The Jam. And here I am listening to the new Dad Rock a couple weeks ago, right? And you're talking about how much you love The Jam, and I never in a million years would have realized that the song from European Vacation, A Town Called Malice, was by The Jam. So you really a lot coming out, establishing what Keith was going to love down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of,
which is ironic. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Speaking of dads, for whatever reason, my dad's a huge Tina Turner fan. I think it's her legs, but he also likes Mad Max and John Wick. So the song "We Don't Need Another Hero" was mammoth. Wasn't she in the Thunderdome itself? Wasn't she one of the?
She was
right in the movie too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
she was in the Thunderdome.
Totally.
Not only the movie.
Man, and then at Burning Man, a bunch of years, I'm not sure it's still there, they actually would build the Thunderdome every year, and 2 people would enter and only one would leave. Well, I think they'd both leave. But in the movie, only one would leave.
So yeah, so big for movies, and then big concert events. We haven't touched on Live Aid. So Live Aid, the fundraiser for the famine in Ethiopia, the double. Actually, your neck of the woods, right, Keith? Philadelphia and London, simultaneous all-day concerts going on. I don't know if anybody's tried that again.
Yeah, but did a band fly between them? I read a book. I don't remember which band did this, but I read about 20 autobiographies. But there was one band that tried to get between the two. I forget which band it was. And they made it, but it kind of sucked. They didn't like it. Who was it?
Yeah.
I'm too lazy to look it up.
I think that's...
Yeah, man, Geldof was a crazy guy. Did he also do, what's that other song?
He did.
Do They Know It's Christmas?
Do They Know It's Christmas? Exactly.
Yeah. Also, he played the role of Pink in The Wall, Bob Geldof.
I know.
By the way, which one is Pink? What else were we going to talk about?
So, strange things happened in '85. There was the first WrestleMania, which I went to. Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful.
So Keith, I'm jealous. You were going to the actual WrestleMania, and I was seeing Jimmy Superfly Snuka jump off the ropes at like my local high school. Remember they used to the tour and like play high schools and stuff. And I feel like maybe it was before '85, but
Jimmy Superfly, that's great.
Yeah, I definitely saw like a local. They build like a stage or a ring like in your local gym, and the big headliner that night was Jimmy Superfly jumping off the top ropes in like my high school gym.
Here's my take on '85. What am I, 12? Yeah, like I know all the individual songs, like Money for Nothing by Dire Straits was used for me. I remember the video of Take on Me by Aha. It's a huge one. Power of Love, obviously from Back to the Future.
Amadeus.
Totally.
Oh, Amadeus.
Which I thought was fascinating. Won Best Picture, and so maybe was the song riding the Best Picture, or did it get Best Picture just because Amadeus got stuck in everybody's head? I wonder.
Oh, I wonder. That's a real earworm. I remember Wild Boys, the video by Duran Duran, which
Wild Boys.
Yeah, because that was kind of like. Yeah, boys with their shirts off. Pat Benatar had We Belong.
I think Wild Child by Wasp came out that year, speaking of wild.
See, I don't know any of that,
Offspring.
Man. Yeah, I mean, If You Love Somebody, Set Them Free by Sting. So I remember all of these individual songs. I don't remember any album back then, unless Weird Al Yankovic had an album that year.
Yeah, well, were you old enough to start buying albums at that point? Because, like I said, I bought Motley Crue Theater of Pain and Scorpions Worldwide Live. I remember buying them at the same day. I remember buying Live After Death as an album. I remember Anthrax Spreading the Disease. I remember SOD, Speak English or Die. Like, I remember those albums as albums.
Yeah, I can't say.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Keith. I think I wasn't quite buying, like, I had my couple of albums, but I think I was buying 45, and you'd listen to the B-side.
Right, I didn't even have my own stereo then, right? So I was using my parents in the living room. So I remember I had the 45. I might even still have it for Dire Straits' Money for Nothing. So I remember that. So a lot of this music I've actually got back to, like, recently because of the New Dad Rock, but I don't really, besides the singles, I don't think I got any of these albums. Oh, sorry, Weird Al Yankovic, Dare to Be Stupid came out June 18th. Terrific album. Big Lizard in My Backyard. Oh, but I didn't listen to that in '85. I listened to that probably in '89, '90. So yeah, I don't think I'm not there yet, Steve. Just not there.
Yeah.
But I got to go back to Money for Nothing, though, because I do feel like, well, but I feel like '85, right? So you're at the midway point, and we talked about, you have these older groups where all the singers are all going solo and putting out things, and you have the connections to there were still some big names from the late 70s that are still, topping the charts. And and then MTV comes up and shakes everything up. And I feel like Money for Nothing was just the ultimate mid-decade, like, okay, we're gonna make the video, we're gonna say that you now have to be, the MTV generation. And I just think it was amazing that the song that sort of makes fun of MTV and how you're just doing nothing, banging on the drum and making videos, becomes a giant MTV hit. And to me, that like is the crossover of the mid 80s right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, New Wave had taken over from rock on the pop airwaves, and rock, like via hair metal, was leaning into like a pop sound to try to fight for their place in the charts. And in the end, that pushed to a bifurcation of the genres, guitar based versus electronic based. And, that's what we know today, like all the different genres. So back then there were more blurred lines. And I think now, with Breakfast Club forming the cliques, and this is where we start to label and commodify different types of acts and artists and styles. But Rush still blurred that line. Were they rock? Were they metal? Were they pop? Were they reggae? Were they just a bunch of nerds?
Dude, it's just tough. I don't see any albums here that would be top 100 for me. I think 85 is a rough year for music. It's weird because there was... Head on the Door came out by The Cure. That's pretty badass.
Everything is just a song. It's a single. It's a pop hit. It's an MTV.
Yeah.
And then you've got Rain Dogs. We're like, what is going... Like, how is he putting that entire album out? And that's the album that sort of stands up. Everything else is just a hit single that came and went from 85.
Yeah, I would love to know the fans of Tom Waits in 1985. Who were those people?
Who were those people? Yeah. David Letterman, I guess. Right? Letterman was going...
Dead Kennedys were playing in San Francisco at this time because Frankenchrist comes out that year. That's a pretty crazy album against the backdrop of the PRMC where we started this episode.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying, metal is getting more extreme. Punk was getting more extreme. The Butthole Surfers had some singles, and I think their first album was out at this point, but they hadn't really put out much by 85. So there's that. There's the Angry Samoans were going around. The Dead Milkmen had just put their first album out. So there's... boundaries are definitely being pushed, and lines are being drawn in the sand. Like, if you don't fit in one group, go more extreme and get more attention the next way.
Yeah, and let's not forget the heroic music by the Fine Young Cannibals and Grace Jones and the World Wrestling Federation, who put out the wrestling album in 1985. Dude, it was quite the year. I'm actually surprised the world survived 1985. Looking at this list of music,
one thing that we mined back from 1985 and did bring into not 2024, but was it 2022 was Running Up the Hill by Kate Bush.
Oh, wow.
Obviously huge from Stranger Things. Yeah. That was 85. So there are a few nuggets out there yet to be discovered. So have at it, listeners. Report back.
I'm just glad 1985 can't come to 2024, come back to the future, and beat me up for saying 1985 sucked, musically speaking.
Although one, I got to give him credit. There was one article I read. Ernest Simpson wrote, and the thing that his quote that I love the most, that he said 85 was the year he was balancing music he wanted to listen to with music he needed to listen to get a girlfriend. And I really thought that did a good job of like summing up music in 85. So much pop. You had to, you had to follow what was going on in pop. But, underneath, like Steve said, and you said, Keith, there was a lot of other stuff brewing, but trying to break through with all the noise.
Yeah, well, it's insights like that, Brian. It's just why we invited you on the show. Welcome back. I'm glad you came back. Hopefully you'll give us another bump like you did 4 years ago. 4 years, man. Wow. Since your last visit. All right. Well, we'll be back next time with 1986, where 3 of the big 4 put out their classic albums. So tune in next time. We'll be with you in 2 weeks. The New Dad Rock. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
All right, the new dad rock out.